My name is Amaka and this is Lizama Stitches. You're welcome to today's tutorial. Thanks for being here. If you're yet to subscribe to this channel, please click on the subscribe button and subscribe, and also turn on the notification bell so that whenever I upload new videos, you will be notified. In this tutorial, I'm going to be teaching you how to make a bustier with yoke. So let's get started. Now this is my basic bodice pattern. I have my seamless basic bodice pattern here. I have a tutorial on how to draft a basic bodice pattern. So I'm going to leave the link in the description box below so that you can check it out later. Now this is my starting point, which is also going to serve as my shoulder line. This is my neck. This is my neckline. The neck width is 4 inches while the neck depth is 3 inches. Now from my shoulder line, my shoulder measurement is the shoulder measurement I'm working with is 13 inches. 13 divided by 2 gives you 6.5 inches. Plus half inch seam allowance gives you 7 inches. So what I have here is 7 inches. Now from this point I came down by 1 inch for my shoulder slant. Now from my shoulder slant I had to impute my armhole measurement. Now this is my armhole line. The armhole measurement I'm working with is 14 inches. 14 divided by 2 gives you 7 inches. So what I have here is 7 inches. This line is 7 inches. Now this is my chest line. This is the bust line. This is the under bust line, and this is the waistline, and this is the seam allowance. I have half inch seam allowance here. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to impute my armhole curve. For me to impute my armhole curve, I'm going to start by taking my bust measurement. Now the bust circumference I'm working with is 33 inches. 33 divided by 4 gives you 8 1/4. So I'm going to mark 8 1/4 here. On my chest point, I'm going to mark 8 1/4. So from here, I'm going to mark 8 1/4. So this is my 8 1/4. Now I'm going to find the midpoint of this line. So this is the midpoint of this line. Now from this midpoint, I'm going to go in by 3/4 of an inch. So this is 3/4. Now I'm going to connect this point to this point and this point to this point with my armhole curve. So just like this. Okay, now let me label these lines. Now this is my chest point. This is my bust point. This is my under bust point. And this is my waist point. This is my seam allowance. Okay. Now my yoke is 5 inches. 5 inches. So from this starting point, I'm going to measure 5 inches. So this is 5 inches. And I'll measure 5 inches. 5 inches. Okay, so I'm going to connect this point to this point. So this is my yoke. If you want to have a sweetheart neckline or a sweetheart yoke, all you need to do is to come down by 1 inch. You come down by 1 inch and you connect this point to this point. Connect it this way. You can come down by 1 inch or 1.5 inches and you connect it this way. Now this is your sweetheart neckline. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to impute my dart line. Now for me to do that, I'll need my bust span measurement. That is nipple to nipple measurement. Now the nipple to nipple measurement I'm working with is 7 inches. 7 divided by 2 gives you 3.5 inches. Plus half inch seam allowance, which I'm going to use to join it together, because I'm going to cut it. Gives you 4 inches. So now I'm going to mark it here on the yoke. I'll mark it on the bust point. And waist point. Okay. So I'll connect the points. I'll connect it with a straight line. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is to impute my dart. Now, from here, I'm going to start from here. Now from here, I'm going to impute my. Now from here, I'm going to mark 1 inch on both sides of this line. Now on my bust point, I'm going to go up by 1/2 inch. And I'll come down by 1/2 inch. Now if you connect this line to the bust, to your bust point, directly to your bust point, it's not going to be nice. It will look awkward. Your bustier will look awkward. So it's either you go up by 1/2 inch or you go up by 3/4 inch, and you come down by 1/2 inch or you come down by 3/4 inch. So now on the bust point, I'm going to mark 1 inch on both sides of this line. On the waist point, I'm going to do the same thing on the waist point. 1 inch. And I'll connect it. So I'm going to connect this point to this point and this point to this point. I'll connect this point to this point and this point to this point. The bust circumference I'm working with is 33 inches. 33 divided by 4 gives you 8 1/4. Plus 1 inch, which I'm going to use to join these together, gives you 9 1/4. Plus 2 inches plus 2 inches seam allowance gives you 11 1/4. Now I like having excess. It's better to have excess. I like working with enough seam allowance. It's better to have excess than to have shortage. After sewing, if I have excess seam allowance, I can trim it out. So I'm going to mark 11 1/4 here. So on the underbust point, the underbust circumference I'm working with is 27 inches. 27 divided by 4 gives you 6 3/4. Plus these 2 inches, for that, which I'm going to cut off, gives you 8 3/4. Plus 1 inch, which I'm going to use to join it together, gives you 9 3/4. Plus 2 inches seam allowance gives you 11 3/4. Now I'm going to add all my seam allowance on this paper. So that gives you 11 3/4. So I'm going to mark 11 3/4 on this line. And the same measurement, the waist circumference is also 27 inches. So I'm still working with 11 3/4. The waist circumference and the underbust is the same thing. So I have 11 3/4 here as well. 11 3/4. Now on this point, on this point, these 2 inches I'm going to cut off here, I'm going to return it here. Because if you don't return it, after sewing, your yoke and your bustier is not going to be the same measurement anymore. So I'm going to return these 2 inches. Now these 2 inches, I'm going to return these 2 inches here. I'll connect this point to this point with my armhole curve. And I'll connect this point to this point and this point to this point. Now I'm going to add my shoulder allowance. So I'm going to cut it. So this is what I have. Now when cutting, you're going to cut this on fold. Your fabric is going to be on fold when cutting this. So you're going to cut one of this and you're going to cut 2 of this. 2 of this and 1 of this. But because you're using net, you can double it. You can cut 2 nets so that you can join it together. If you're using net, you can cut 2 nets so that you can join it together. Double the net. So this is the back panel. If you don't know how to draft a basic bodice pattern, I have a tutorial on how to draft a basic bodice pattern. I'm going to leave the link in the description box below so that you can check it out later. This is my starting point, which is also going to serve as my shoulder line. Now from here, I'm taking now this is my zipper allowance. I have 1.5 inches zipper allowance. Let me label it. Zipper allowance. Now I have 1.5 inches zipper allowance here. So every measurement I'm taking, I'm going to take it this way. I'm going to take it away from the zipper allowance, just like this. Now this is my shoulder measurement, 7 inches. Now from this 7 inches, I came down by 1 inch for my shoulder slant. And I connected it to the neckline. Now the neckline is 4 inches, just the same. The neck width is 4 inches, just the same as the front. 4 inches, and the neck depth is 1 inch. Now I'm going to change this neck depth. This is just a basic pattern, but I'm going to change this neck depth. I'm not going to be working with this neckline. Now this is the armhole. This line is the armhole line. Now the armhole measurement is 14 inches. 14 divided by 2 gives you 7 inches. So this line is 7 inches. And this is my chest point. Now I have to extend this point with an horizontal line. So this is my chest point, this is my waist point, and this is my seam allowance. So I'm going to impute my dart. Now for me to impute my dart, I'll need my nipple to nipple measurement. The nipple to nipple measurement I'm working with is 7 inches. 7 divided by 2 gives you 3.5 inches. So I'm going to mark 3.5 inches here. Now remember that at the front, I used 4 inches because I added ½ inch seam allowance, which I'm going to use to join the front panel together because I had to cut it. But this one, I'm not cutting it, so I'm using 3.5 inches. So I'm going to mark 3.5 inches here. And I'm going to do the same thing here on this line. 3.5 inches, and I'll connect these points. From my chest line, I'm going to come down by 1 inch. And on this line, on my waist point, I'm going to mark ½ inch on both sides of this line. Now I'm going to mark ½ inch here and ½ inch here. And I'll connect this point to this point and this point to this point. So this is my dart. Now I'm going to impute my armhole curve. For me to do that, I'm going to take my bust measurement on this line. Now the bust circumference I'm working with is 33 inches. 33 divided by 4 gives you 8 1/4 plus 2 inches seam allowance. 33 divided by 4 gives you 8 1/4. So from this line, I'm going to mark 8 1/4. 8 1/4. Now, I'm going to find the midpoint of this line. And I'm going to connect this point to this point. I'm not going inside. I'm connecting this point to this point. And I'm going to add my seam allowance. My seam allowance, I'll be working with 2 inches. 2 inches seam allowance. Just as the same as the front. 2 inches. Now on the waist, I'm going to take my waist circumference on this line, on the waistline. Now the waist circumference I'm working with is 27 inches. 27 divided by 4 gives you 6 3/4. 6 3/4 plus this 1 inch for that gives you 7 3/4. Gives you 7 3/4 plus 2 inches seam allowance gives you 9 3/4. So this is 9 3/4. And I'm going to take the same measurement here. 9 3/4. So after that, I'm going to add my seam allowance, my shoulder seam allowance, which is 1/2 inch. So I'll connect the points. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the zipper allowance. I'm going to eliminate the zipper bulge. Now, what I have here is 1.5 inches. I'm going to minus 1/2 inch from here. From this line. Now from this line, I'm going to minus 1/2 inch. I'm going to cut off 1/2 inch. So I'm going to connect this point to this point. I'm going to connect this point to this point. Now you can use 3/4 inch, you can use 1/2 inch, you can use 3/4 inch, you can also use 1 inch. It all depends on the amount you want to remove. So I'm using 1/2 inch. Now from here I'm going to create a new zipper allowance. So from this line I'm going to come in by 1/2 inch. And I'll connect this point to the same point. I'm going to be cutting this off. This is no longer useful to me. For the back yoke, now this is what to do. Now from this starting line, I'm going to mark 5 inches. I'm going to mark 5 inches for my back yoke. And I'll do the same thing here. 5 inches. And I'll connect it. If you want it to be a V neckline, the back neckline, you want it to be a V neckline, all you need to do is just to connect this point to this point. Now this is how to do it. If you don't want to use this neckline, you can use this. You cut this off and this will be your yoke. This will be your yoke, but you can also use this. You can also use this as your yoke. So it all depends on what you want to do. So I'm going to cut it. So this is the front and this is the back. So with this, now I'm going to cut two of this. I'll cut two of this. I'll cut one of this. Now this is going to be on fold. And I'll cut this. Now this is my yoke and this is my yoke. So now I've cut my fabric. Now this is it. Now this is the center front. Now this is this. This was on fold. This was cut on fold. Now this is it. While this one is double, this and this. And this is the back. The back is also double. This is the back panel. And this is the back yoke. Now I have 4 pieces here. I have 4 pieces of this yoke here. Now this is what I did. I left 1 inch seam allowance here and I left ½ inch here. Now this is how it's going to be. Now this is my zipper allowance. This, I'm going to use this allowance to fold, to turn my net. I'm going to use the allowance to turn my net. And this, I'm going to use this allowance. This is 1 inch seam allowance. I'm going to use it to join this to this. Now, I need ½ inch here and ½ inch here. So that's why I left 1 inch seam allowance here. So the front, now this is the front. This is the front yoke. I also have double. I have double net. I'm going to double my net. So now this is the yoke. Now on the yoke, I have 1 inch seam allowance. I have 1 inch seam allowance on my yoke here. I have 1 inch seam allowance, which I'm going to use to join this to this. I'll need ½ inch here and I need ½ inch here. That's why I left 1 inch on the net. So I have a tutorial on how to pad your blouse. I'm going to leave the link in the description box below so that you can check it out later. So this is it. Now I've attached interfacing on the main fabric and on the lining. The lining has interfacing too. Now this is how I'm going to join it. I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to join it this way. Now I'm going to bring this one and I'm going to bring this. I'm going to join it this way and I'll sew it. I'll sew it this way. Then I'll bring this. I'll place it this way and I'll sew it. I'll sew it from the lower part to the upper part. Then after sewing, I'll open it this way. The same way I'll sew this, I'm going to sew the lining the same way. For the back, I'm going to sew the dart. I'm going to sew the lining too, and I'm going to show you how to join it. So now this is my blouse. I've padded the front panel. Now this is it. After padding it, I'm going to notch here. I'm going to notch and I'm going to open this seam and iron it very well. I'm going to give it a good press. I'm going to iron it and I'm going to do the same thing to the lining. I've joined the lining the same way, so I'm going to do the same thing on the lining. Now I'm going to show you how to join your net. Now this is the net. I've also sewn the lining. I told you that the net is double. I've also sewn the net. I told you that the net is double, so I brought the two nets together and I had to sew it. So after sewing, I'm going to turn it to the right side. Now this is it. Now this is it. I'm going to turn it this way. Now this is how I'm going to attach it to the blouse. Now this is the front panel. Now this is the right side of the main fabric. I'm going to place the lining this. I'm going to place the net this way. Now this is how it can be. This is how it will be easy for you. Just place the middle, the center front at the. Now this part, place it at the middle and you pin it down. Pin it and bring all together. Bring the net together and you pin it. what you will do. When you take it to your sewing machine, you can sew it first. You can sew the net first on the main fabric before attaching the lining. Now the net is facing the right side of the main fabric. The lining is also going to be facing the right side. You place it this way. You place it and you sew it. You sew it. As you're sewing, make sure that your net is inside. Don't sew your net. Don't sew your, just sew the seam. Don't sew your net. Just sew only the seam. Now after sewing here, you join this part together and you sew the sides together. Sew it with 1/2 inch seam allowance, and you sew here with 1/2 inch seam allowance, the sides with 1/2 inch seam allowance. After sewing, you turn it inside out. When you turn it inside out, this is what you will have. Your net will be outside and this is your yoke. So I'm going to do it. After doing it, I'm going to show you how to join the shoulders. Now this is the back panel. This is the back panel. I've done the back panel. You remember that I left 1/2 inch seam allowance on the net, which I told you that I'm going to use to sew it because the net is double. So this is a 1/2 inch. I've sewn it and I turned it to the right side. The same thing I did here, and the same way I told you that I'm going to sew this, that's how I did this one. I placed the net in between the main fabric and the lining, right side facing right side, and I sewed it. After sewing, I had to sew the sides. I've not sewn the armhole, and I pulled it out. So this is it. And I've also sewn the darts. The same thing with the lining. I've sewn the dart. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to iron this. I'm going to iron it, and now this is my zipper allowance. I'm going to attach my zipper allowance. Then I'll join the shoulders and shape it and join it together. So I'll do it and show you. So guys, this is my top. Now I've sewn it. Look at what I did. I joined the front panel and the back panel together, and I sewed it. Now this is it. Now when you turn it, the seam allowance is inside. It's not showing from here and it's not showing from here. And inside, this is what the inside looks like. So this is it. Now I'm going to stop here. This is where I'll stop. Now this is a gown. It's a short gown. I only want to show you how to make a yoke bustier. So I'm going to stop here for today. It's bye for now. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Lizama Stitches. And also like and share my videos.